Episode 13, Hidden Reward Unlocked. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Sandra's skirt was still splattered with the knocked-over spaghetti. Previously, she would probably have been angry about it. But now she looked at Keith in silence, her face full of fear. Keith said coldly, "I will not lend you the money. Don't ask me again." Sandra was shocked at Keith's blunt words, but she was also unwilling to give up. She relied on her fierceness, and her husband was a shrewd businessman. In the past, she'd always been domineering with relatives, but in this instance, her nephew was even fiercer than she was, and what's more, he didn't seem bothered by the thought of falling out with her. His words were spoken with such decisiveness. At that moment, the systems chimed in Keith's mind. "Dayon, you've shattered Sandra's and your cousin's wish to mock you. Attribute point +1. Dayon, you fulfilled your parents' wish to not lend money. Wish value +1. Dayon, system prompt. Respecting one's elders is very important. This is the first time you fulfilled a parent's wish. Hidden reward unlocked. 1 random skill will be awarded the maximum level. System is selecting a random skill for you. Please wait." What? Before Keith could react, the system's voice sounded again. "Dayon, host obtains maximum skill level in Culinary Mastery." Culinary Mastery? You want me to be a cook? Keith was slightly stunned, but then the corners of his mouth turned up to form a beautiful arc. Having more skills wouldn't add any pressure on him. In fact, the more skills, the better. Ignoring this system in his mind, he looked at his mother and said gently, "Mom, don't you have a notebook where you keep a record of your accounts? Bring it out so Sandra can take a look. We're going to settle the accounts properly, work out how much money she owes, and when she plans on paying it back." At that point, Sandra finally came back to her senses and screamed, "Keith, you're pushing your luck. Remember who my husband is? Don't think he won't get someone to teach you a lesson." Keith's eyes turned icy cold. "Are you threatening me?" He stepped over to Sandra and said coldly, "I don't care who you are. I hate nothing more than when people try to threaten me. Do you want to repeat what you just said?" Sandra felt like she was a rabbit in the sights of a hunter. She thought that if she dared say another word, the wolf would tear her apart without hesitation. She looked at Keith in fear and said with a trembling voice, What are you doing?" The rest of the family was stunned by this change in Keith's demeanor. They looked at him in a daze, hardly even daring to breathe. Just then, the doorbell rang. There was a collective flinch before Keith's mother ran to open the door. The group of people standing outside only increased her jitteriness. 7 or 8 people in suits bustled into the house. The leader was a middle-aged man with a kind face, who Keith recognized from TV. This was the mayor of Summerfield. Behind him was the chief of police, James Cooper, and Keith's supervisor, Sergeant Quinn Taylor. Although he didn't know the rest of the people, Keith could tell they thought they were important. It was then that he remembered what Quinn had told him at the hospital. The mayor's office and the senior police team would be visiting him at home for a congratulatory press shoot. He hadn't expected them to come so soon. The mayor smiled and said, "Keith, right? I heard about your story. You've done a great service for our community. You've helped get rid of the scourge of our society. It's so great to meet such young and promising residents of Summerfield." The man stretched out his hand as he spoke, and Keith quickly stepped forward and shook it. "You flatter me, sir. I was only doing what was necessary. Please, come in and take a seat. I'm sorry if it's a bit of a mess. I wasn't expecting you so soon." It was only then that the crowd looked around and realized what a state the room was in. The floor was covered in smashed dishes and splattered spaghetti. The man laughed and said, "Keith, looks like you had a tornado through here." Keith scratched his head in embarrassment, while James winked at him from over the man's shoulder. He grabbed a rag from the sink. "Just a minute, sir. Let me clean this up." Keith and his dad scrambled to clean up the mess, while his mom got everyone seated and fetched them drinks. When they were done, the mayor invited Keith to join him on the couch and began chatting away amiably with Keith and his parents. Sandra couldn't believe her eyes. Jaden, Travis, and Aunt Mimi were just as shocked. One of the most prominent leaders in Summerfield had come to Sam's house as a guest and had even brought a camera. Was that young man with them a reporter? Even more surprising was the attitude of Keith, James, and Quinn as they talked. They looked like old acquaintances, chatting away comfortably. These two were respected figures in Summerfield. Could it be possible that Keith was friends with them? Good heavens, Sandra thought to herself. If it hadn't been happening right in front of their eyes, Sandra and the others would never have believed it. She didn't know whether she should stay or not. The thing is, two of the VIP group were standing by the door chatting away. Sandra didn't even dare to walk through them. She realized how childish her words had been just now. Her husband ran a local business and knew a lot of people in the community, but compared to the group in this house, it was nothing. Keith took in the expressions of the people around him one by one, and he couldn't help but laugh to himself. But when his gaze landed on his cousin Travis, Keith did a double take. Travis's eyes were shining as he looked at the camera lady. The woman operating the camera was beautiful as Quinn. No wonder Travis was so entranced when he saw her. At that moment, there was an angry voice beside his ear. "Keith, some of the most important people in Summerfield are here. What are you staring at?" The voice was Quinn's. Keith instinctively shrank back when he heard her and hurriedly looked away from the camera woman. Quinn saw this and snorted. She rolled her eyes at Keith as she seemed to realize something. Her ears turned slightly red. Just then, Keith's mom, who'd been chatting away merrily with their guests, suddenly said, "You must have come straight from work. I guess you haven't eaten yet, right? Oh, why don't I get you some food?" The mayor looked at Keith with a twinkle in his eye. Keith had left a very good impression on him. The young man was polite, but not too humble in front of his superiors, and the way he spoke and conducted himself was impressive. The mayor could tell that Keith was a highly capable young man. For the first time, the mayor addressed James, who was standing beside him. Chief Cooper, should we have something to eat before we leave?" James chuckled. "All right. We have a lot of people, though, Mrs. Sandra Bird. I don't want to trouble you." Keith's mother waved him off with a smile and was about to head into the kitchen when Sandra's eyes lit up. She blurted out, "Oh, but Mayor Anderson, don't you know Keith is a fantastic cook? In fact, why not let him show you his culinary skills by making you dinner?"